Her fingers traced the empty space on the shelf where 5 rare vinyl records stood yesterday. She turns, finds the brokerage statement crumpled in the study wastebasket. The numbers don't match. $20,000 gone. From the kitchen, her husband's voice hums along to Miles Davis, and she looks back at the vacant space on the shelf, understanding dawning cold and sharp. She pulls out her phone to check the transaction date. The morning light fell across the vinyl shelves in long, slanted rectangles, illuminating the dust that collected on the spines of albums they never played anymore. Maya ran her feather duster along the top of each sleeve, a weekly ritual she developed out of respect for the collection that had consumed half the living room wall and a significant portion of their discretionary income over the past 5 years. Frank loved these records with a passion she'd once found endearing. He would spend hours online researching pressing variations, tracking rare releases, telling her stories about the crackle of original analog recordings versus digital remasters. She'd sit on the couch and watch him handle each album with the careful reverence of an archivist, and she'd think, at least he has something that makes him happy. At least it's not another woman. The duster paused. There, between Kind of Blue and A Love Supreme, a gap. She blinked, looked again. 3 inches of empty space where 5 albums had stood yesterday. She knew because she'd dusted them yesterday morning while he was at work. The records didn't move. Frank handled them, but always returned them to their exact positions. Maya crouched, checked the lower shelves, thinking maybe he'd reorganized. Nothing. She stood slowly, the duster dangling from her hand, and looked toward the study across the hall. The wastebasket in Frank's study was where he crumpled things he meant to throw away but never did. Receipts, junk mail, drafts of work emails. She'd learned not to touch it. He got territorial about his papers. But now she crossed the hall, her feet silent on the hardwood, and looked down. A single crumpled envelope lay on top, crisp white against the other debris. She recognized the logo, their brokerage firm, the one that held the shares her father had given them for the children's education. She picked it up, unfolded it with fingers that had begun to tremble. Transaction confirmation. Sale of $20,000 in mutual funds. Dated 3 days ago. The vacuum seal of the house pressed in around her. Somewhere a bird sang outside. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Normal sounds, normal morning, normal life. Except for the paper shaking in her hand and the empty space on the shelf in the other room. Frank's car pulled into the driveway. She folded the paper, shoved it in her pocket, and walked back to the living room. She picked up the duster, ran it along a shelf, and watched through the window as her husband gathered something from the back seat. He came in carrying a flat square package wrapped in brown paper. A record. Another record. Found it, he said, smiling. Original Blue Note pressing. You wouldn't believe what I paid. She looked at the empty space on the shelf. She looked at his smile. She felt the envelope press against her thigh, through her pocket like a live coal. I'll make coffee, she said. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the familiar smell of medium roast. Maya watched the brown liquid drip into the carafe, counting seconds, counting anything to keep her hands from reaching into her pocket and pulling out that paper again. Frank settled at the kitchen table, unwrapping his new acquisition with the slow ceremony he always performed. Tissue paper unfolded. The sleeve emerged, slightly worn at the corners, smelling of old cardboard in someone else's attic. Look at this, he said, tilting it toward her. 1957. Can you believe it? She couldn't. She couldn't believe any of it. Where did you get the money? The question came out before she could stop it, and she heard how strange it sounded. Not casual, not curious, but sharp at the edges. Frank looked up, his expression shifting through something she couldn't read before settling on mild confusion. What do you mean, I've been saving? For a $500 record. On your salary. She poured coffee, keeping her back to him. That's half our grocery budget for the month. It was $400, and I traded in a few from the collection. He said it lightly, the way he always dismissed money concerns. You know, I rotate things out sometimes. Maya turned, holding her mug with both hands. Which ones? What? Which records did you trade in? Frank's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. I don't know, a few. The Coltrane from last year. The Mingus. Why are you interrogating me? Because there are 5 empty spaces on the shelf, she thought. Because the numbers don't match. Because $20,000 is a lot of records. But she said nothing. She sat across from him and sipped her coffee and watched him admire his new purchase. And she felt the shape of the envelope against her thigh, and she wondered if she was losing her mind. That afternoon, while Frank took the children to the park, she went back to the study. She opened his laptop. His password was their anniversary, always had been, and navigated to the brokerage site. The transaction history loaded slowly. 3 days ago, sale of $20,000. 2 weeks before that, a transfer of $5,000 to a checking account she didn't recognize. 2 months before that, another transfer, $8,000. She wrote the numbers on a scrap of paper, added them, $33,000, gone since January. The Children's Education Fund, once robust, now held less than half of what it should. She closed the laptop, wiped her fingerprints with her sleeve, and sat in the darkening study as evening fell. When Frank came home with the kids, their voices bright with stories of the playground, she was in the kitchen making dinner, the scrap of paper hidden in her underwear drawer, the envelope burned in the sink and washed down the disposal. That night, she lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, and she tried to construct explanations. A secret investment, a surprise for her, a loan to someone in trouble, anything but what her gut kept whispering. In the morning, she called the bank that issued the unknown checking account. She pretended to be Frank. She knew his birth date, his mother's maiden name, the answers to every security question. The customer service representative was helpful. Yes, the account was active. Yes, the address on file was an apartment on the other side of town. No, she couldn't share the name associated with the account without authorization. She hung up, wrote down the address, and stared at it until the letters blurred. 2 days passed. 2 days of dinners and school runs, and Frank humming along to his records while Maya moved through the house like a ghost haunting her own life. She watched him for signs, secret smiles at his phone, unexplained absences, the way he'd started showering before coming to bed instead of after work. She found them all, or imagined she did. She couldn't trust her own perceptions anymore. Saturday afternoon, he announced he was going to meet an old friend for drinks. His voice was too casual, his explanation too detailed. She kissed him goodbye, waited 15 minutes, then put the kids in the car and drove to the address she'd memorized. Maple Street was lined with small apartment buildings from the 1970s, brick and balconies and shared parking lots. She found the building, parked across the street, and told the kids they were playing a game. Count how many red cars you see while mommy makes a phone call. Frank's car was in the lot. She watched the building for an hour. He didn't come out. No one came out. The kids got bored and whiny, and she drove them home, her hands numb on the wheel, her mind constructing and demolishing explanations with equal speed. He came home at 9, smelling of beer and something floral, perfume, or soap that wasn't theirs. He kissed her cheek, said the guy said hello, went to shower. She waited until the water ran, then checked his phone on the nightstand. The messages were deleted, but the notification preview on one app showed a fragment. Get the whole week together. Landlord says we can sign the new lease Friday. Can't wait to wake up next to you every day. She put the phone back exactly as it was. The next morning, she packed the kids a picnic, drove them to her mother's house for the day, and returned to the apartment on Maple Street. She knocked on the door marked with the unit number from the bank records. A young woman answered, mid-20s, dark hair, pretty in an unremarkable way. She wore yoga pants and a t-shirt from a brewery Maya had never heard of. Can I help you? Maya had rehearsed a dozen approaches, but now facing her, all of them evaporated. I'm Frank's wife. The woman's face didn't change, didn't register shock or guilt or anything. Just looked at her with mild curiosity, as if Maya had said she was the mail carrier. I know about the apartment, Maya said. I know about the money. The woman leaned against the doorframe. Okay. That's all you have to say. What do you want me to say? The woman shrugged. He said you'd probably figure it out eventually. He said you were smart. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her. He told you about me. Of course, we've been together 8 months. He talks about you all the time. She said it without malice, without triumph, as if discussing the weather. He says you're a good mother, that he doesn't want to hurt you, but he loves me. The words landed like stones, one after another, each one heavier than the last. Maya gripped the door frame, steadying herself. He sold our children's education fund to pay for this, she said. $33,000. Do you know that? For the first time, something flickered in the woman's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or concern. He said the money was from an inheritance, his own. It was mine from my father, for my kids. The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped back. You should come in. Maya didn't move. I don't want to come in. Suit yourself. The woman crossed her arms. Look, I'm not going to apologize. I didn't make him any promises. But I'll tell you this, he said he was going to leave you. Said he was waiting for the right time. The apartment was supposed to be our place, our start. When? He said after the holidays, then after the kids' birthdays, then after something else. There's always a reason. She shrugged again. I'm starting to think there won't ever be a right time. Maya stood on the doorstep of the apartment her husband had bought with her children's future, looking at the woman he'd chosen instead of her, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not grief, not yet. Something harder, cleaner. Thank you for your time, she said, and walked away. She didn't confront him that night, or the next. She moved through the days like an actress playing herself, making breakfast, helping with homework, kissing him goodnight. The performance exhausted her, but she couldn't stop. She needed to understand, needed to see the full shape of the life she'd been living without knowing it. She found more in the following week. Credit card statements for dinners at restaurants she'd never visited. Hotel charges from a conference he'd attended in March. A photograph in his cloud storage, buried deep, of the woman from Maple Street lying in bed, smiling at the camera. She copied everything, saved it to a folder she named Recipes. The records kept arriving. 2 more this week, both expensive, both added to the collection that now filled 3 floor-to-ceiling shelves. She watched him catalog them, clean them, play them on the turntable while he read the liner notes with the concentration of a scholar. Jazz poured through the house. Miles, Coltrane, Mingus, Evans, the soundtrack to her marriage's last days, and he didn't know she knew. On Thursday, she drove to see a lawyer, a woman her age, sharp-eyed and direct, who looked at the documents Maya spread across her desk and didn't flinch. $33,000 is just what you found so far, the lawyer said. We'll need to do a full forensic accounting. There could be more. There's always more, Maya said. The lawyer explained the process, the separation of assets, the division of the house, child support calculations, the possibility of criminal charges for theft if the funds were truly hers by inheritance. Maya listened, nodded, signed forms, and drove home through streets that looked exactly the same as they always had. That evening, Frank came home early. He found her in the living room, standing before the vinyl collection, counting. Hey, he said, everything okay? She turned, looked at him, this man she'd loved for 15 years, the father of her children, the collector of records and women and secrets. I know about the apartment, she said. I know about the money. I know about her. The color drained from his face so completely that for a moment she thought he might faint. He reached for the wall, steadied himself. Maya, don't. Her voice was calm, the calm of someone who has already passed through the fire and come out the other side. I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Let me explain. You sold my father's shares. Now her voice cracked just slightly. You sold our children's future so you could rent an apartment for another woman. There is no explanation for that. There are only words, and I don't want to hear them. He tried anyway. He talked for 20 minutes while she stood motionless, watching his mouth form sentences she couldn't hear. He loved her. It was a mistake. The woman meant nothing. He'd pay it back. He'd sell the records. He'd do anything. When he finally stopped, she said, "The lawyer will contact you tomorrow." She walked to the front door, opened it, and waited. He passed her in the doorway, and she caught the scent of him. Familiar, intimate, the smell of her entire adult life. And then he was on the porch, and the door was closed, and she was alone in the house with the children sleeping upstairs, and the vinyl records lining the walls, and the needle of the turntable resting silent in its cradle. She locked the door. The weeks that followed were a slow excavation of the life she'd thought she had. The forensic accountant found more. 47,000 total, siphoned over 11 months. Rent payments, hotel stays, dinners, gifts, a weekend trip to the coast that Frank had claimed was a work retreat. The woman on Maple Street had been just one part of an elaborate architecture of deception. Frank's calls went unanswered. His texts piled up unread. He showed up at the house once, and she called the police. He sent his mother to plead his case, and Maya closed the door in her face. The children asked where Daddy was, and she told them he was staying somewhere else for a while, and she held them while they cried, and she didn't cry at all. The lawyer moved quickly. The house was in Maya's name. Her father had helped with the down payment, and the shares traced to her inheritance were clearly hers. The court awarded temporary full custody and froze the joint accounts pending the final settlement. Frank moved into the Maple Street apartment full-time. In the third week, she received a letter, handwritten on paper she recognized from his study. Maya, I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I threw everything away. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. The records, they were never about her. They were about me trying to hold on to something beautiful when I felt myself falling apart. I know that doesn't make it right. Nothing makes it right. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. I just needed you to know that somewhere in all of this, there was still a part of me that loved our life together. Frank. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in the envelope, and put it in the box with the other documents the lawyer had gathered. That weekend, she went through the vinyl collection. She researched each album's value online, made a spreadsheet, calculated the total. $23,000 if she sold them all. Not enough to replace what he'd taken, but something, a start. She posted the collection on a marketplace site for collectors. Within hours, offers began arriving. She accepted the highest, a dealer from 3 states away who specialized in rare jazz pressings. He arrived on a Tuesday with cash and crates, and she helped him pack the records she'd watched her husband handle with such reverence for 5 years. The last album in the collection was the one he'd brought home the morning she found the envelope. The Blue Note pressing, still sealed in its brown paper. She pulled it out, unwrapped it, looked at the cover, a woman's face, abstract and beautiful, staring into some middle distance. She handed it to the dealer. Wait, he said, examining it. Do you know what this is? A record. A 1957 Blue Note first pressing in near mint condition. He looked at her with something like awe. This alone was worth $8,000. She thought of Frank's face when he'd brought it home. His smile, his pride, his casual dismissal of her question about the money. $8,000. A year of piano lessons for both children. 6 months of their mortgage. The apartment on Maple Street for 3 months. Still selling, she said. The dealer packed it carefully, and she counted the cash he placed in her hand, and when he drove away, the living room wall was empty for the first time in 5 years. Just shelves, just space, just dust. The divorce was final on a Thursday in December, 6 months after she'd found the crumpled envelope in the wastebasket. The judge awarded her the house, the remaining assets, full custody with supervised visitation for Frank, and a monthly child support payment that would take years to recover what he'd stolen. The woman on Maple Street moved out when Frank couldn't pay the rent anymore. Maya knew this because Frank told her in one of the monitored messages he was now required to send through a court-approved app. He was living with his mother. He was looking for work. He was sorry. He was always sorry. Maya deleted the messages without reading them fully. The children adjusted, as children do. They stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. They started calling the guest room Mommy's office instead of Daddy's study. They played and fought and grew, and Maya watched them and felt something healing inside her, slowly, like a bone knitting back together. On the first anniversary of the day she'd found his envelope, she came home from work to find a package on the porch. Small, flat, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. She carried it inside, opened it in the kitchen. A record. Miles Davis. Kind of blue. A first pressing, the dealer's sticker still on the sleeve. $1,800, the sticker said. Inside the sleeve, a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. I bought this from a dealer who said he got it from you. He told me the story. I've been where you are. It gets better. Sell this if you need to, or play it if you can. Either way, know that someone out here sees you. A stranger. Maya held the record for a long time. Then she carried it to the living room, to the empty shelves that still lined the wall, and she set it in the exact center of the top shelf. One album, alone in all that space. She stood back and looked at it. The turntable sat silent in its cabinet. She hadn't played a record since Frank left. Hadn't wanted to hear the music that had filled their house for so long. But now she crossed the room, lifted the dust cover, placed the album on the platter, and lowered the needle. The crackle filled the room first. Then the trumpet, Miles, distant and intimate at once, playing something that sounded like goodbye and hello and everything in between. Maya sat on the couch and listened. She didn't cry. She didn't think about Frank or the woman or the money or any of it. She just listened to the music, alone in her house, with her children asleep upstairs and the empty shelves beside her and one record spinning in the dark. When the first side ended, she got up, lifted the needle, turned off the turntable, and went to check on her kids. The record stayed on the shelf. One album, alone in all that space. A reminder of what she'd lost. A reminder of what she'd kept. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones that survive the silence.